Anyway, I like to point that out because there are divide and conquer narratives happening throughout every sector of our society. And about 3 weeks ago now, a man named Sayer G, he's one of the Disinformation Dozen, just a fantastic human being, invited me into the Kennedy team. And so I've been observing this interaction, and Del Bigtree and Mike Adams and Sherry Tenpenny, who I just had a great chat with, and Dr. Ed Group, and all these massive names that are like Kennedy's closest kind of advocates are on this chat. And it started out where it was before Kennedy's confirmation, and everybody was focused on calling your senators and getting the word out and doing all this stuff, political stuff. And I kept propping little seeds in there. I'm like, okay, yes, this is important, but what about going out at the same time and planting some seeds? What about actually becoming self-reliant yourself? And then eventually, when we achieve mass adoption, of simply using our resources wisely. Our land, God's design, is infinite in its ability to create abundance. And I've noticed that this group, there's maybe 10% of them or 20% of them that resonate with that message. But a lot of the others who are very wise, incredible people, they're stuck on the path of fighting the existing reality, right? And of course, who knows the Bucky Fuller quote, the Bucky Fuller concept? You cannot change things by fighting the existing situation. Instead, build a new model that makes this model obsolete. Well, the new model that we're talking about is not really a new model. It's the oldest model in the book. It's the model of the Garden of Eden. It's a model of a place where you walk around and there's food all over the place, right? So when I first started studying permaculture, I was actually going through a tough time because it was 2007 and I had my first two daughters, right? Mia and Selah. And when I learned, in fact, I'll share the brief story. I was sitting in Costa Rica where I had moved. I started a mortgage company that did about $1.3 billion in gross revenue. I sold it. I then bought a boat, lived on the ocean for a while, and I was looking for the next thing to do. I started a foundation called the Wisdom Foundation, and my goal was to get emotional intelligence, which changed my life in the years previous, taught in every school in the United States. And I started going into the schools and talking. And what I was met with was absolutely kind of shocking. I was met with angry teachers that were taking my message as a criticism. It wasn't a criticism. It was really me criticizing my own ignorance because I was so ignorant. I didn't know any of this stuff. Then when I learned it, I couldn't help but share it because that's what we do when we learn something exciting. So anyway, after that transition, and I stepped away from dealing with the Board of Education and the Department of Education and all that, I moved to Costa Rica. Hey, Pooch. And then I learned, I was at a little expat table. Hey, buddy. And there was a group of 8 people sitting at this table. There's an FBI, former CIA agent, a former New York cop, a drug runner, and those 3 were the best friends at the end of the table. And then there was an artist and a homeless person sitting here, and my dad was a retired pipe fitter, and I was there, and there was one more person. And the guys at the end of the table said, Jim, don't you know? And I don't know what the previous thing was. It was just random conversation. But they said, don't you know that 9/11 was an inside job? And I started laughing. And I said, and I got this smirk. And I did what a lot of us have seen here when we say something that people just don't resonate with. I kind of went, you're crazy. That is impossible. There's no way that could happen because too many people would have had to have known about it, and then we would know about it, right? I was not aware of compartmentalization And by the way, one of my partners now, his name is Christopher Allison. He was the security team leader at the Pentagon for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. He's now our Freedom Farm Academy operations guy and a lot more. So he's on the land with me every day. He told me because of his role, he was at the Pentagon and he would go to all the different departments as a security team leader. And he said, Jim, they don't have any idea what this room is doing compared to this room, compared to this room. So compartmentalization of knowledge is so wicked and so dangerous. And by the way, this idea of patents and NDAs and non-competes and 50-page contracts and clicking yes to something on your Amazon contract without reading it, right? Which I've done and I will continue to do because simply any contract under deception or under duress is invalid. Absolutely. So it's just a little side note.
Consideration.
There. Yes. So what happened to me when I first heard this is I tried to disprove it. My intention was to prove these guys were wrong. So I started doing the research and then I learned that they weren't wrong, and then the layers of the onion unfolding, I had tears. I'm like, oh my gosh. And then I went into a place of scarcity. Now, historically speaking, I'm a super positive and optimistic guy. I love life. And so when I learned that the world is being run in an unsustainable way, and then I learned that all unsustainable systems fail, and then I was thinking about my daughters and the rest of the world. I love nature. They called me Nature Boy growing up. I just love this place. And so when I learned that, I went into this period of fear and cognitive dissonance. And I was trying to fight the system. I was trying, what's going on? And then I read Bill Mollison's quote, right? Bill Mollison is the father of permaculture. And he wrote, though the problems of our world are increasingly complex, the solutions remain embarrassingly simple. And I started to bawl. And I made a commitment at that time that I was going to focus my life for the sake of my daughters, my family, my friends, and our world on asking new questions related to what is the actual solution to this, right? How, and I recognized right then, and I know a lot of people don't like this term, you could call it war, you could say we are at war, or you could call it a divine game, right? I like the game theory myself, right? I am playing a divine game. And how do we play the game? We look, observe, and interact with our world, and we ask questions. Does that relate? Is that relatable? How do we put these pieces of the puzzle together? And every once in a while, a quote, which is really a concept, will strike us, and it'll hit us like a boom, a wave of enlightened energy. And some of these quotes, which I will share with you now, have led me to where I am now. And first of all, I guess I'll start with that pattern. Where I am now is my family and I, with 3 other families, live 100% off-grid. You're all invited. We're doing another Peace Festival here in, when is that one, Wayne?
March 8th.
March 8th, yes.
And we have some Airbnb available.
Yep,
Sign
awesome.
up with me.
And thank you for helping me with the dates. My time, I left that beat. But, so, where was I going?
That you're having food.
Yeah, okay, so I'm off-grid. We are not only off-grid in the fact that we have wells, we have our own water, we also are putting in rainwater catchment systems. We have a ridiculous abundance of food. We have 260 different species and different types of food-producing plants, and then multiple varieties of each of them. So we have an incredible amount of food growing, and it's a baby food forest. One area around the statue it'll be 3 years in April. And now you walk in there and there's life, right? There's birds and there's bees and there's butterflies and there's lizards, and it's just, and people say, what do you use to control the pests? We don't use anything. What do you use to control the pests in there? Right? Nature does the work. So here's where I think it gets even a little bit more unique, is we made a declaration of freedom. I made a declaration of freedom about 4 years ago. I said, I am no longer going to comply with any force and violence. There's not any bit of fear that can dictate my actions, right? And the foundation of this is my awareness, my realization that taxation is theft.
Right.
That we cannot have freedom if we pay taxes on our labor and if we pay taxes and rent our land. So we went ahead and built 10 homes without asking for permission. And about 16 months ago, I get a call from Carlos, my guy on the land, my partner, family member, and he said, Jim, there's a guy from the government here with a clipboard and a badge asking to see building permits. Right? I had a wave of adrenaline go through my body at that moment. And I stood up, I took a few deep breaths, and I asked God for guidance, and I started walking. And I turned on my camera. And by the way, what I'm sharing with you is a strategy. So please take note, and if you have this experience and you want to ever get a hold of me, please do. I turned on my camera, and I walked up to the fella. And let's say this is the fella. I walked up, and I said, hello, my name is Jim Gale, and I'm recording this conversation just so we don't mix up any words here. I've had government officials lie over and over about things that were actually happening. So it's super important. If you ever get pulled over, if you ever have any interaction that might turn into something kind of interesting, just record it, right? Because it's for your own awareness and protection. Because now, if they start saying something that is not true, you can say, oh, well, by the way, I've got the recording of it, right? And I let him know. I said, this is being recorded. And he said, hi, my name's Alexi. I said, well, it's nice to meet you, Alexi. And by the way, I just want to share something. I had the belief system going into this conversation that he was going to act like an authority figure over me. And that was not acceptable, right? And so when we have belief systems, they are filters for truth. Right? Every belief system we hold is a filter for what's actually happening. So I had this belief system, and he said to me, I said, how did you get permission to come on my land? Implied consent is not granted, and it's posted. And so if you want to do some research on this and get these signs, it's both legally and lawfully unjustified for him to be there. Right? Without being asked, without permission. So anyway, what he said was, I'm sorry, the gate was open, so I came in, but I will leave if you want me to. And that disarmed me. It took my energy of kind of, like that energy, and it just, and so I said, well, might be the right thing, it might be a good idea, but before you leave, I'd like to share something with you. So I said, can I show you something? So we walked. He said, sure. I like this guy. We become friends. And we walk into the food forest, which is about maybe 80 yards from there. And I said, this is our duty to our posterity and to everything we love about life and about this world. It's our duty to be the stewards and the protectors of this land. And the government, the agency that you represent, has lost its moral authority. And he had a little white paper with check marks, like little boxes. And I said, what that little deal will do is allow me, even subsidize the use of poisons. You will allow me to cut all of this down and kill everything, as represented by every HOA community up and down the road that you have approved. And he got a tear in his eye. And he said, you're right. I will never bother you again. And they haven't been back. The ultimate strategy to defeat evil is to go right into the heart of the beast and offer to serve. So, the permaculture ethics. Now, my partners now, I've got a lot of great partners, and I have failed at operations now since the mortgage company, ever since then, and since before that, the wrestling team, which I was, it was an amazing day. I was a freshman in college, and I was very enthusiastic, and I worked hard. And it was time to elect a captain of the wrestling team. Now, in the NCAAs, usually you're a senior, sometimes a junior. And anyway, I was a freshman, and a guy nominated me captain. It was seconded. I ended up being a captain freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year. We started at seventh in conference, right? Which is one of the reasons I was elected captain, because the team sucked. Right? And by our senior year, we were second nationals.
Wow.
Right? That was one of those moments that really shaped me. And I started recognizing that I could play a role. And then I read Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill, right? One of the best books. And Napoleon, and these are the concepts that I was talking about at the beginning that just shape us when we start really understanding the power of these concepts. Napoleon Hill he was commissioned by Carnegie to study the most successful entrepreneurs in the world. And Carnegie set him up with all of these meetings. And so he went and studied these people for decades. And his primary deduction is whatever the mind can conceive and believe it can achieve. So who am I to argue with Carnegie or to Napoleon Hill? Instead, I'm going to say, okay, this is one of the most studied people in the world on this topic. So then I ask myself, how does that relate to what we want to do? What can I conceive and believe? Because if I can fully conceive and believe it and then go beyond belief, right? Belief is also a filter. What about just living it or experiencing it? So we've created the situation, not only a hypothetical solution to deforestation and mass extinction and cancer and diabetes and heart disease and hunger and depression and trauma and tyranny and war. It's a demonstratable solution, right? And when our ultimate security, okay, so back to our team now are a bunch of operators that worked at the highest level in the Marines, who are also very spiritual and very connected and awake to what's happening, which is why they got out of that situation. And now they're working we've come together to help organize effectively. This is another concept that's so powerful. Dr. Martin Luther King said, those who love peace must learn to organize as effectively as those who love war. Right? Contemplate that for a little bit. What does that mean? Well, that's the question. How do we organize effectively? And around what do we organize effectively? And that is why, for what I see, and the layers keep adding on, but what I see is when we catalyze a shift in awareness that leads to mass adoption of taking the poisons out and using our resources wisely, boom, government is irrelevant. That whole system of mind control becomes gone from our individual minds. And then as individuals, we shine a light and demonstrate. And then other people see that energy and see the lives that we're living and say, I want that too. Can I have that too? Absolutely you can. It starts with awareness, right? The word choice is almost always misrepresented because the word implies the awareness. And if there's not an awareness, then there's not a choice, right? So number one is to create awareness of what's possible, and that's why it's so important that we're all here today. Because all of us are seeds of enlightenment, seeds of solutions, that now you get a little nourishment and you go out and you start talking and sharing this message. And boom, and it's happening, my friends. I have been part of this conspiracy world now, and until COVID, I was told by friends, Jim, we'd like you to come to this party because you're a lot of fun, but please don't talk about 9/11. Please don't talk about Building 7. Please don't talk about any of your conspiracies. And then, 2 drinks in, and there I go. I was into that. So anyway, something has shifted, and it's accelerating, right? The shift is accelerating, and now there's interesting stuff going on. I am in these groups, but I'm not of these groups, right? I'm aware, and I'm seeing these conflicts and seeing these debates happen where they're trying to censor the least censorable people around who made it into the group because they can't be censored. And guess what? It's working because everybody wants something to hold on to other than God's design, other than direct connection with love and with spirit and service. So full circle now, back to what Chris Allison taught me were the military or the Marine soft truths. And the number one soft truth, and I have just come to feel that this is the reason permaculture isn't everywhere. Permaculture, Bill Molson is one of my heroes, one of my great mentors. And I believe he may have been an atheist or very not spiritual. And the permaculture ethics are earth care, people care, and reinvesting our surplus to earth care and people care. And I like looking for, why isn't this working? Where's the kind of misdirection in this? Not intentionally, but people care has to be first. Why? Because we are here to be the stewards of the earth. If we put people care at number one, and we lift up the most suffering among us, those become the most powerful among us, right? As you know, in the prison system.
Well, Matthew 25, if you've done it unto the least of these, you've done it unto me. That's people care, bro. Yes. You fed me when I was hungry, you clothed me when I was naked. Keep going, brother. Preach it.
So that's beautiful. Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
That's what it's all about. So when we kind of realign those permaculture ethics to people care, and then we ask, how can we serve? And this is another really important strategy. This is a tactic for freedom, because the more I am serving now, and the louder the voice gets, for my personal protection. People have been telling me for 4 years. I've had many partners leave my presence, but because they said, Jim, you're going to get killed, and I don't want to be anywhere around it, and I can't support it. I'm okay with that, because I cannot live by the threat of force and violence. I can only live, there's a frequency to faith.
Correct.
There's an energy field.
Yes.
Right?
Authenticity.
Yes. And there's also a frequency to fear.
Yes.
Which one are we going to choose? If we are ever driven by fear, then we are probably making some bad choices.
Yes.
And then we are also not aware of who we are. Know who we are. Anybody see Moana? Know who you are, right? Yeah. So, and by the way, this is backed up by Sun Tzu, The Art of War. His primary deduction is so powerful. Know thyself, know thy enemy. 1,000 battles, 1,000 victories. Contemplate that for a second. When we know who we are, our enemy is ignorance. Our enemy is the unawareness of who we are. And then we cannot lose a battle. And something profound is happening, my friends. Because now the message is going out where I am very publicly inviting. I used to use the word calling out, but that has a different connotation. I'm inviting the local mayor of St. Cloud. We were communicating quite a bit until he got elected. And then I've sent him messages, and he's reading them, and he's not answering. I know why. Because I'm doing everything illegal. right? Now, check this out. So we're at the end of the road, and we're on the right, and we're on a private 430-acre lake where we've got the only docks on the lake. It's really neat. And then on the other side of the road is the sheriff's training center. Like what? So about 2-3 months ago, in fact, it was the inauguration, or no, it was the 20th of January. The sheriffs have big events there where they get sheriffs from all over the nation, and they take their campers and their horses and their families, and they go party on this ranch over there, the Kirchman Foundation Ranch. And on the 20th, I walked over there with a huge wheelbarrow full of sweet potato starts, and I wheelbarrowed it over to those sheriffs, and I'm like, hey, sheriffs, is your job to reduce crime? Is that your job, to protect and serve? Yes, I think it is, right? To reduce crime and to protect and serve, right? Well, here, this is how you do it. You create abundance, because there's only one thing that can supplant scarcity, and that is abundance, right? There's only one thing that can supplant war, and that is peace. And abundance is the foundation of peace. Because when we have abundance, we take away the scarcity. And when people eat, when the kids are eating, in fact, people often say to me, Jim, you've got so much extra food, you've got food security. Not quite yet. We will have food security when our neighbors' kids have food security. When our neighbors' kids are eating, then we're good, right? So I'm calling out, I'm inviting Chris Robinson. I'm inviting Governor DeSantis. I'm inviting Donald Trump. And of course, Bobby Kennedy's already full on the path. And by the way, I'm aware. People say, Jim, how could you work with these people? I'm inviting Elon Musk and Tony Robbins and Tucker Carlson and Joe Rogan. And I hear it all the time. Jim, these people are part of the scam. Well, first of all, it's the invitation that the people hear. Because it's not to them to grow their gardens. It's to us. It's to every one of us individually to be the change. Right? In fact, I just sent a quote over, and it's a long one, and I just sent it yesterday to this Kennedy group, and not one thumbs up on the group. It basically said, if you're screaming at the government, you're fighting the government, and you're doing all these things to the government, but yet you're not self-reliant, and really you want this system to fail that upholds the credit cards and all this stuff, if you're screaming at a system desiring it will fail, and the failure of it leads to chaos, that's ignorant, right? The system is unsustainable, and all unsustainable systems fail. So we have transition or collapse. Collapse is bad, right? Collapse, if it happens next week, we might be down to what the Deagle report said, about 90 million people by the end of the year, right? That would be a wipeout of probably 2/3, based on the Deagle report. Transition, then, is the only way, right? It starts in the heart and the mind, and then start planting seeds, right? Seeds. And now, this is where it gets exponentially fun, is when I walk in my food forest now, I'm not a farmer. I don't grow anything, right? God does that. I build soil. I put mulch on the land, and then I bought soil to put it in certain places where we put a tree in the ground. And then we use Doc Will Spencer and Pat Militich's fertility juice, right? Which is like this compost tea made up of over 1,000 different living microorganisms. And we spray that on the ground. And what does that do? It's a catalyst where it actually eats heavy metals, and it poops out bioavailable nutrients and fatty acids. And by the way, I have no idea the time, so if I'm getting to that time, just give me a thumbs up and I'm done. All right. Keep going, or is that the time?
It's time, but I'll give you another minute.
Okay, thank you. All right, so, man, that was fast. All right, time is such an illusion. So we're starting a school, 25 kids, 3 teachers. As a result of their parents sending their kids to this school, all of their food needs will be met. We're starting a CSA community-supported agriculture group. We've got an off-grid systems. We've got all of these different systems that we are here to show and to demonstrate, and that's my job. I don't deal with the details. I simply live free. I put it on camera, and I show people how wonderful it is to do so. So thank you, everybody, for doing what you're doing. Love you.
Love you, Jim.
All right, thank you.
All right, so thank you, Jim. And can everybody just stand up for a minute, please? All right, then sit back down. Go ahead, sit back down. I just want to get you guys some blood flowing, so there you go. All right.
What if you can't sit back?
Very, very. Thank you, Jim. Very, very powerful always, and he could pretty much run the whole day if he wants to, and we'll probably welcome him back again. The next guest speaker, we're gonna go right into the next guest speaker, Bo.